It's time now for our weekly segment Korea Book Club. Instead of our usual book talk with Barry, we'll have with us today Theodorujun박, a teacher of Sun meditation who has recently published a series of books titled Chamseon, or Zen meditation. After spending more than 20 years as a Buddhist monk, he's now out in the world trying to teach others of his findings. The books are in Korean and not yet available in English, but we thought we'd take this opportunity to speak with Mr. Park himself and learn more about his work. Mr. Park, it's great to have you on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Let's begin from the start. You were born and raised in New York in the US. How did you start your journey with Sun or Zen meditation? What were you searching for when you first came to study the art of Sun meditation?
Well, from a very young age, I had many questions about the ultimate meaning of things. For example, what is the meaning of life? What is its purpose? Why were we born into this world? Why do we have to suffer so much in living our lives? What will happen to us after we die? Does some part of us continue to exist? Or is the body all that I am? So these were the kind of questions on my mind, and I was, in the course of searching in my youth, going through books and so forth, I eventually discovered Zen Buddhism. In Korean, that's called Sun Buddhism. And the meditation that I eventually got involved with is also called Sun.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then how did you actually... So I understand you had an encounter with Songdang Snim, and then you spent over 20 years as a Buddhist monk under the name Hwansan. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, in the course of learning about Buddhism, what I heard or what I was taught was that that the answers to these existential or spiritual questions have to be experienced in your mind and body. They can't be conveyed in words. So I heard about Songdam Snim, the man who eventually became my teacher, and went and sought him out. And that's actually what he ended up telling me, that it was through a kind of training, and both physical and mental, that we could experience these answers. They cannot be explained in words. So.
And then you spent, as you said, 20 years as a Buddhist monk. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about that time? That's a long time to spend.
It is a long time, and definitely the first few years were quite difficult. I was born and raised in the United States. I was culturally American. So I did not speak Korean at all, actually, when I started. So initially I had to learn the language. I had to learn Korean culture, and then I had to learn the very specific culture of Korean Buddhist monasticism. So that took quite a while. But, I did make the adjustments and eventually, went on to live that way.
I understand you also provided Sun meditation classes in English via YouTube.
Yeah, so about the last 7 years of my time as a monk, I taught publicly. And I was teaching both in English and in Korean. And because Korean Sun Buddhist meditation is not well known, a lot of people became curious and started coming to me. One thing led to another. I did make, I was actually invited to host a cable television program for a few years. And the YouTube channel is actually videos from that program. So.
And then eventually, after 20 years as a Buddhist monk, you decided to come back to the outside world. What led you to that decision?
Well, I felt that I was in need of a kind of spiritual rebirth. Becoming famous was not why I had become a monk. And as you mentioned, 20 to 30 years in a monastery is a long time. And I found that I think the initial inspiration was not exactly fading, but I was getting used to things. I was getting used to living on donations. I was getting used to be treated with a certain amount of respect or something within that community. I was performing rituals, more on habit as time passed. I'm actually embarrassed to say, than on inspiration. And I was being asked to represent a set of teachings that are sort of both unprovable and undisprovable. To my mind, that's the definition of dogma. And so it seems I felt that I had strayed from my original spiritual purpose, the reason why I had become a monk in the first place, and I did need a kind of a rebirth. And so I don't feel that I actually returned to society as that I simply went on to the next phase. I simply live now without a title, without a special position, And anyone who sees me on the street will see that I'm an ordinary person. In fact, I have become an ordinary person and try to practice within the context of the real world now.
You've now written about your journey in your recently published book, Chamseon, and another book to be published early next year, I believe. What made you then decide to chronicle your journey into this book?
Well, actually, these books represent, for me, the completion of a mission that was given to me by my teacher, Songdam S님. It was not my choice to come out and teach and speak publicly. He actually called me aside about 7 years ago and asked me to teach, to share these Sun meditation teachings with the modern world, both with domestic Koreans living here in Korea as well as the outside world. And I was actually contracted to write these books during that period. And so I simply finished what I had begun 7 years ago. And these books contain my best description for modern people of this ancient tradition and of this ancient practice, so that they can, if they want to, if they're inclined to, they can take up the practice themselves. And I try to keep it as jargon-free as possible.
The subtitle for the first of the Chamseon series can be roughly translated as "When in distress, look to the body." You mentioned that Sun meditation is meant to help with people deal with perhaps some of the difficulties of modern life. How does Sun meditation work? How does it help people in that way?
Okay, I think in order to understand that, we need to sort of move away from our stereotypical image of meditation as something you do in an isolated spot away from the complexities of the world. So meditation Sun meditation is a technique that's meant to be used in the moment of living. So in Korean, it's described as a practice you perform at all times in all places. So this means that if you get upset, you don't wait until you have a little spare time and meditate. In the exact moment of meditation, in the exact moment of getting upset, you begin this particular form of practice. Going to the body, so the way I usually say it is when you get upset, go to the body. When people get upset, usually they have an inner conflict. They try to talk themselves out of being upset. Don't get angry, don't raise your voice, that kind of thing. But when you do that, you're really just creating inner mental conflict. When you're upset, by definition, you have lost control of your thinking process and of your emotions. Therefore, go to the one thing that you still can control, which is your body. So for that means specifically your posture, your breathing, and then finally you work on your mental your mental focus.
Wow, so it starts from the physical.
Yes, your posture. So it's very logical, it's very practical. And with a little bit of training, you can use it in your office, in your home, in your school, in the middle of an argument with your boyfriend or girlfriend or spouse, really under any circumstances.
Although the notion seems to be changing a little bit these days, many people still see meditation connected to Buddhism as a religious act. But I understand you don't promote it that way, as such.
I believe that anyone can practice Sun meditation. I also believe that it is uniquely suited to our time. Because of all these advances in technology, the speed of life in modern society is so much faster. The level of complexity is so much higher. At any given moment, our brains are being overwhelmed by an amount of information that we can no longer handle. And also, we live in a kind of media environment where we're constantly being stimulated by advertising. Being stimulated by advertising, it may seem like nothing, but actually what it means is that you are being put into one of two states, either one of extreme desire to get something or fear that if I don't get this thing, something will happen to me. If I don't buy this insurance, I'll be unsafe. If I don't buy these shoes or these clothes, people will look down on me. So we're constantly being provoked both physically and emotionally by this advertising that surrounds us on all sides and gets to us through all of our devices. And so what we need, I believe, is a way to regain ownership of our own mind and body, to find a way to be peaceful and calm and centered and feel safe in the midst of the storm. It used to be that if you go to a Buddhist monastery, just through sheer geographical isolation, you could have spiritual and psychological solitude. Now that doesn't work. Even in the monasteries, everyone has cell phones. There's dishes for, satellite dishes for TVs and so forth. So that no longer works. And I believe sun meditation gives us a way, any person, religious or not, a way to regain their sanity and their sense of well-being without having to physically remove themselves from wherever they happen to be.
I think a lot of people would agree that in modern society they are looking for that, and you can see it in how meditation, it's springing up everywhere, and there's a lot of meditation centers and even apps on your phone. As you said, that's a distraction in itself, but it's popping up in these kind of environments. It seems that meditation in general is being presented as a way to look after your well-being or general health, mental health. What are your thoughts on this? What is the ultimate goal of meditation in your view?
The ultimate goal of meditation, the traditional goal, and I'll say this in a modern way, is to eliminate all mental suffering and to bring us to our peak levels of intelligence and joy. It's really as simple as that. Now, the way that traditional religions frame that, they will say that all suffering, all of it, can be removed, and we can rise to a level of intelligence and joy that would probably be considered superhuman these days. But nonetheless, those are the same goals, even if you don't take those kind of teachings literally. So in the short term, if you were to start meditating right now, you would feel your stress levels go down. That's the elimination of suffering. You would feel your mind become more clear. So you do become more intelligent. You do feel more calm, and there is a positive sensation, a kind of quiet joyfulness that you feel. And if you do this as a constant practice, a daily practice, let's say, using seated meditation in your daily life, then over the long term, what you find is your baseline state. Your baseline level of mental suffering goes down. Your baseline level of, mental clarity, emotional calmness and sensitivity, joy in living, love for our fellow human beings, all of that starts to enhance. And you can confirm this experientially. You don't need a religious authority to tell you that this is so. You don't need to rely on religious texts. You will experience it in your own mind and body, and you will be the judge of your own experience.
And finally, for you, what is the ultimate goal for this book? You've released this book now. You said it's a completion of this task that was given to you by your teacher. Is this the end of that now, or is it going to be a continuing kind of mission?
Well, the purpose of the book, and I suppose in a sense my own purpose in living, are overlap. And the purpose of the book is to preserve and share these teachings in a way that's accessible in this day and age. For myself personally, I have the same goals that I always had even when I was a Buddhist monk, and that is to practice this and also to share it with anyone who has an interest in it. So, yeah.
Well, it's been fascinating to talk to you today. We've been speaking to Theodorujun박, a Sun meditation teacher and author of the Chamseon book series. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me.